Hey, good morning, guys. Welcome to another installment on apologetics. This has been a part of a longer series that we've been talking about why we can believe in the Bible, what's important about the Bible, and what is it exactly that we're basing our faith on. Sorry, tripping over my tongue today. There are a lot of things that we've already covered. If you are new to this series, please, I encourage you to go to our YouTube channel and check us out on at the church as well. If you don't currently have a church, um, really do invite you to come out and join us at Sunbreak Baptist Church. We're out on Yelm Highway in Lacey, Washington. Pastor Bobby Ball and the entire team actually do a really great job of trying to make sure that people feel welcome. We're not one of these giant mega churches. We're just a lot of people who actually care about each other and treat each other like a family. So if that's what you're looking for, please come out and check us out. Again, I said this is part of a larger series, and that series has been around apologia, which is defending our faith. A lot of people don't have a background in debate or a background in trying to decide what and why they believe what they believe. And so this series has been built around that. Now, what we've been covering so far is going to be dealing with how the Bible is unique. We've talked about the archaeology that continues to just affirm the histories that are written down in the Bible. And we've also talked a lot about how it was written, why it was written, and the fact that it's unique in the sense that it was written over 1,500 years by 40 different authors of different levels, different education, different statuses. We've talked about how its prophecies about future events like places like Tyre and other areas have all come true. We've reviewed about how its prophecies about Jesus, beyond what Zechariah said that he would need to be riding in on a donkey, also have proven true. In fact, there are a little over 300 prophecies that speak just about Jesus alone. More than 200 were fulfilled during his first time here on earth. There are quite a number more that speak about his second arrival. So if that's a new concept to you, if that's something you've never heard of before, trust me, there's more to follow. Now, we also talked about, are there problems? Are there issues or reasons to discount the Bible, reasons to not believe it? Or are there just excuses that other people have given as to why they don't want to believe it? And then also, there's a test. We're going to talk about some of the issues that make a lot of Christians cringe as it relates to their faith and our faith. And so it's going to be one of those that something for you to do on the Google Classroom is try to work together in order to create answers to some of these issues. Now, these are issues that I've faced as an apologist, as someone who's gone out and debated individuals. And so I want to see how you're doing. How are you doing in your progress in this course, and how might you handle some of these questions? So first, let's deal with some of the Bible difficulties. Now, one of the things that shows up initially, it's one that always gets thrown up, is issues with Genesis. Genesis 1:27 says man was created equal, male and female. And then in Genesis 2, it says women are created as a companion to man only after he rejected all the animals. Now, are there issues between Genesis 1 and 2? Kind of yes, kind of no. One of them is kind of the difference between how you explain something to somebody. Genesis 1 to me is kind of an overview, and Genesis 2 is going into the details. Genesis 1 is, hey, here's the big picture, and Genesis 2 is how we made it happen. So if you're talking about, say, a business plan, you might say that Genesis 1 was the vision and mission, and Genesis 2 was the actual plan on how to make it happen or what happened. Now, did Genesis 2:18 through 24 really say that woman was only created as a companion after man rejected all the animals? No. What it says and what it lays out is man was given the task to name all the animals which he was doing. Man at this time is alone. So we're talking about Adam. And Adam's doing all this work for God. And God looks down and he says, it's just really not good that man is on his own. He really should have someone that is his equal to be with him. And even Adam comes into agreement with that, saying, God, I've looked out over all these creatures and there isn't anyone that's like me. And so it's at that point that God, as the story is told in Genesis, puts Adam to sleep, takes the rib, creates woman, and then says, blammo, here you go. Here is someone who is your equal. This person is your best companion. Now, how about other issues? God asked Cain the whereabouts of his brother. Cain's response, obviously, is, who am I, my brother's keeper? God goes to see what's happening. Genesis 18:20-21. Now he's talking about Sodom. God is everywhere and sees everything. Proverbs 15, Jeremiah. And all of these things are, seem to be in conflict. Why would God ask Cain where his brother is? Why would God need to go down and see what's happening? And the thing is that these are conversations. God's having a conversation with Cain. He's looking to Cain to see if Cain's actually going to be honest with him. He's having a conversation with Abraham. He's saying to Abraham in words that would make sense to Abraham. Again, we're talking about a dude in the middle of the brass and copper age who's not even wearing underwear yet, let alone the fact that he's having a conversation with God Almighty. Saying, okay, look, I'm going to go down, I'm going to check it out, but, if I don't see any improvement or anyone that's even remotely improving, we're going to destroy it all. So is this really a contradiction? No. It's just that you got to put things into context. And a lot of times that is the key issue, is that things just aren't put into context. Now, there are other difficulties, but they arise from things from the original text. I mean, you got to understand, there were no vowels or punctuation in the original text because the Hebrews did not use them. So as an example, when they're talking about one of the original names of God as Yahweh, it's written as YWH. So I mean, we're talking about, there's no vowels, and we're trying to figure out, how do you pronounce that? So I've written a little sentence there, and see if you can tease it apart. Now, granted, I included the vowels just to make it a little bit easier, but imagine if the vowels were not there. It would be challenging to try to interpret this. There's also issues with translation. Part of that, and keep in mind, these are difficulties. We've already covered why we can rely on the Bible. We've covered the history of the Bible. We've covered other reasons why the Bible is factual. These are things that cause other people problems. So as an example, there are idiomatic expressions from an extinct language representing the speech pattern of an ancient society translated into present-day speech. To put that in a way that might make sense, I dare you to try to explain to your teenager what an 8-track tape is. Let alone, what if you went back even 20 years and tried to explain to someone what LOL stands for? These are different expressions for a different time. And so trying to understand what exactly it meant took a lot of work, and they were difficult to overcome. As an example, translation phrases such as the Lamb of God versus God's sheep child. Now, two totally different expressions, but both are accurate. Is a lamb a young sheep? Yes. Who did it belong to? God. Are we still accurate? Yes, but not really. It's the interpretation that's the challenge. So, as an example, when I was over in Kazakhstan, one of the things that one of my friends did for me was he took me to this church, and before we go to the church, he's like, this is great church. It's bilingual church. You're going to like this very much. So I'm like, okay, great. We're in this bilingual church. This is going to be fantastic. So he was correct. It was bilingual. The pastor was giving a sermon in Russian. His wife was sharing the sermon in Kazakh, and my friend had helped me out. He had gotten me one of the university students who was sitting there and interpreting both of these and explaining it to me in English in my ear. So one of the things that I spoke about were the 12 disciples. There's no word in Russian or Kazakh for disciple. There is, however, student. So when she was translating it to me, she translated it as God and his 12 students. Now, is this a inaccurate interpretation? No, not really, but the power and the depth of the meaning of the word disciple is different than the word student. Euphemisms or symbolic language that have no modern counterpart. I mean, as an example, hitting the bullseye. There are people from other parts of the world who would look at that going, why in the world would you hit a bull in the eye? What are you thinking? But that's not what it meant. It meant more along the lines of you actually hit the target perfectly, and that the center of the target is known as the bullseye. Now, there are also issues with false interpretations. Aristotle's flat earth model was really, really common. And as a result of that, during that time period, Christians and theologians would try to mold and reinterpret the Bible to align with Aristotle's flat earth concept. So even when the Copernican model came along, showing that in fact the earth was not the center of the universe, showing that in fact his interpretation and review of the Bible identified that the earth is in fact round, as Isaiah points out, and also that in fact we rotate on elliptical heliocentric circles around a sun. The theologians were the ones who threw their arms up because they had been teaching and reinterpreting the Bible context as it related to an Aristotelian model. Now, we have a modern problem like this. I mean, you can't say, well, these were just ancient, ignorant people. No, there are people today who, the JWs, the Jehovah Witnesses, they've taken the phrase, the life is in the blood from Leviticus, completely out of context and interpreted it in such a way that they cannot and will not receive life-saving blood, even if their child or their spouse has been in a traumatic accident and they're sitting on an emergency bed going to die if they don't get a transfusion. Because of their interpretation, because of their beliefs, they will not allow that transfusion to happen. And quite often, when they go to have surgeries, they will actually say, you know, look, I can't receive any blood during the surgery, and they may forego the surgery because of it. Now, type of language. Part of what we also have to consider is that some of the language as it's written in the Bible is written in jargon. So as an example, it's written for a very specific audience. So there are things that were written for the Jews at a time period when many of them were so enthralled and caught up in the Egyptian life that they wouldn't have understood what they were actually supposed to understand if Moses had spoken it in a language that was unfamiliar to them. So he spoke only in language that was familiar to them. Now, doctors do this all the time. Plumbers, electricians, we all use a jargon that is unique to our field, to our careers, and to, you know, people who are like-minded. We would never explain to individuals, you know, hey, this whole H1N1 thing, it's got a hemagglutinin that's buried right onto the receptor of the first molecule as it relates to X, Y, and Z. I mean, it's one of those that if I would start to get into the biochemistry of what goes on with a virus and the bird flu, people would just sit there and go, hey, you've just like gone way over my head. I don't understand. Whereas if I say, well, you know, this is a virus that it has specific parts that connect really well to other parts that are unique to your body, to your cells. Oh, okay. Well, it's a little bit different language, still saying the same thing. So that's something that often has to be accounted for. Incomplete knowledge of customs, history, geography, and society of Bible times. I often remind people, you know, you cannot apply a Western mindset to a Middle Eastern culture. And I grew up in the Middle East, and there's still a lot of things that don't make sense. When I try to explain to people how you do business in the Middle East, as an example, it follows a platform that is completely foreign to most Americans. So as an example, you go to try to do business in the Middle East, you're not going to get business done on your first trip and first meeting with people. They follow what's called a three chai philosophy. The first time that you have chai or tea with someone, you're just introducing yourself. You're saying, hi, I'm Bob. Nice to meet you, Bob. Great. The second time you meet, it's probably going to be over not only the chai, but you're probably going to have some snacks, a little bit of a meal together. You're probably going to spend anywhere between 4, 6, maybe even 8 hours together. It's only after that second one that they'll even claim to know you or have met you if someone asks about you. It's not until after the third one, where now maybe you've spent 15, 20, 24 hours with them, several meals, lots of discussions, to where now they say, okay, maybe I know you well enough to do business with you now. Americans want to get in, get out, and do business and like make their money and go. That doesn't work in the Middle East. And the same is true with a lot of the things that show up in the Bible, because we have to remember most of what is told in the Bible is written around Middle Eastern culture, Middle Eastern concepts, Middle Eastern just experience. How would you know that when you're talking about the level of importance of the Nile River, most people in America would be like, what's a big deal about a river? There's a river right down my street. I don't understand. Well, if you understood the culture, you would understand that the Nile River, as it relates to the Egyptians, they treated it as if it was a god. It provided everything that they needed, and all life surrounded the Nile River because of its size, its strength, the fish that they would get out of it, the fact that they could water their crops, their animals, maintain their own life. It was a big deal. So you got to understand things in context. The other one is ignorance of the conditions under which a certain book was written or a certain commandment was given. Why would he say, destroy all the Canaanites? Well, what we don't know is how bad did the Canaanites become? You look at what happened with Sodom and Gomorrah. These became some really nasty people. And the thing is that the Canaanites or any of the other situations that are brought up, we have to know what was the rest of the story. And unless we know the rest of that story, it may not make a whole lot of sense when we're reading that story. The many different sides of the Bible. Whose eyes are we seeing it through? I mean, are we seeing it from David the shepherd boy's eyes? Are we seeing it through David the king's eyes? Which witness saw it? Are we talking about Matthew or Mark or Luke or John? Who saw it? One of the things that's common with police work, in fact, is witness testimony. You have to have at least two who saw the same thing the same way in order for it to really stand up in court. And even then, you want to have good circumstantial hard evidence that also lends credibility to the witness statements. The Bible knew, and the Old Testament really understood, that you needed to have at least two witnesses before you could convict anyone. Not because you couldn't believe the first witness, but two different witnesses might give you two sides of the same story and actually lend a lot more detail to it. When a crime happens here in the modern times, even a car accident, what people saw and what stood out to them is very different for each and every single person. And it's not something that you can necessarily say, well, we all saw the same thing. Well, yes and no. I mean, how many of you pay attention to what was going on behind me? Did you happen to see that someone walked by my window just a little bit ago? Maybe you did. Maybe you didn't. Did you see it in the reflection or did you see it in the window? Maybe you did. Maybe you didn't. The infiniteness of God and the finiteness of man's understanding. As an example, Isaiah spoke of the mountains that were on the ocean's floor, but man couldn't confirm that at that time. There's no way. In fact, it would be several thousand years after Isaiah writes this that we would actually have the technology to go down there and even take a look. I mean, we're talking, only within the last 30 years that we've had the technology to have cameras and submarines capable of going down there and actually seeing it as it really is, not just based on radar or satellite images or anything else. Fallacies of logic. One of the things that comes up a lot is, people, they try to apply a level of logic, but it may be incomplete. So they may say, well, all dogs have four legs, all tables have four legs, therefore all dogs are tables. Not exactly the way it works out. Sadly, the other part might also be the dullness of our own spiritual perception. There are times, man, I just feel thick. I read something, I'll read it like 6, 7 times, and I can't make heads or tail of it. I'm looking at it and it's like, man, I am just not getting it. It might be a few weeks later, different things have happened, and then I reread that same section, and all of a sudden, wow, I get it. Now it makes sense to me. And it may just be something that was going on at the time that was truly dulling my ability to see what was in front of me. The other thing is bias. Bias and presuppositions are two of the biggest killers of being able to effectively interpret and understand what you see in the Bible. You having an angry atheist versus a devout believer is a scenario where you have the atheist giving the excuse. Look at this contradiction. Man and woman were not created equal. Look, she was supposed to be the servant to Adam. There's, right here proves God hates women. What? That's not what I said at all. But that angry atheist has interpreted it one way based on their own beliefs, their own bias, and their own issues. There's a few other pieces, such as when a finite man tries to understand the infinite God and his actions, difficulties are bound to arise. That's one of the things that we have to try to always understand. We have a very limited mind. Now, it is incredible. Our brains can do amazing things, but it is still never going to be equal to the infinite mind of God. Many people, when I try to explain even fourth, fifth, and sixth dimensional thinking, their brains go clank simply because it's not something they would do on a normal basis, but it is something we are capable of doing. When we start talking about algorithms that are designed in order to help artificial intelligence create algorithms that then can reinterpret and recreate new networks, new memories, new programs, even new disks, in terms of servers and technology and next level, next generation stuff. Man, that's a level of thinking that's beyond the scope of a lot of people, but there are some pretty brilliant people out there that are creating just that. Now, the presence of difficulties or objections don't in any way prove that the Bible is untrue. In fact, we've gone quite the contrary to that just in the past few weeks, showing you why the Bible is true, why you can believe in it, why the histories are accurate. And then the other piece here is that one's inability to solve a difficulty doesn't imply that the problem is unsolvable. And that's one of the things that, some people get stuck on. Look, when you're reading through something, it may just be today, it may be just this week, maybe it's just one of those, you're going through a rough spot. Maybe that's why you're having a difficulty with that passage or that section. And that may be a reason why you think, man, this doesn't make sense. This is just, there's contradictions here. There's issues here. There's blah, blah, blah. You just could be having a bad day. The apparent problems in the Bible become negligible when they are honestly compared with the incomparable excellencies of the Bible. There's so many right things, so many amazing aspects of the Bible that we should never throw away the entire thing simply because we come across challenges on a few things. And history is our witness, sorry for the typo, that the alleged difficulties are given much more weight by superficial readers in comparison to serious students of any type. One of the biggest challenges I face on a regular basis are individuals who have read one line, listened to one thing, they heard one sermon, and from that, they created this whole set of biases and interpretations and problems in their mind with the Bible, as opposed to going back and doing a thorough study of all of it, as opposed to going in and really diving deeper into what did it say in the Aramaic, the Hebrew, the Greek? How could that be interpreted today in a different way? What are some of the things that were going on historically at the time that this was happening that lend credibility to what was being said? If you dive deeper as a student into the Bible, so many of the difficulties not only disappear, but so many of the reasons for you to believe and genuinely have a more truer, deeper faith start to develop and cement themselves as a foundation for how you face things in life. Now, there are many problems that are artificially created by propagandists, and these do not have their origin in the scriptures. There are people that'll say things that, well, the Bible says this. And if I ask them, show me, they can't. It will be because of something that they heard, something, some professor told them something, or some atheist told them something, who they too had never read the Bible. And so they would sit and build a case around a whole bunch of third and fourth person testimony, and none of it actually related to anything that anyone could point to in the Bible. When I've asked people, show me in the Bible what verse says what you're saying, they can't do it. And then if they can point me to one particular verse, I sit there and say, okay, great, let's look at it. And when we do, as we look at it, we identify that, in fact, it's been taken out of context. That one line or that one phrase, when laid out in the entirety of what was going on in that chapter or that book or that entire segment, reveals an entirely different outcome than the way that they interpreted it. Now, the other thing is what I would tell anybody to do. Careful and prayerful study will resolve pretty much any difficulty that maybe you're having with the Bible. So I hope that that helps a little bit. But now we're going to get into some real challenges. On the Google Classroom, I'm going to post all of these questions. And what I want you to do is try to find ways to answer them and submit them as a Google document. And we can discuss some of the answers, because I'm intrigued. Where are you at in your apologetics development? We are going to go into some topics here that maybe they still make you squirm. Hopefully we've covered enough things so far in this course that you have answers for it. But again, this is a test, no cheating. So if you've been studying this as a couple, try to answer them individually and then come together and see what comes up. I'm going to go ahead and read through all of these questions and give you a little context on a couple of them. But what I want you to think about is that maybe you've met some new person on the Evergreen College campus, and these are some of the things that come out of their mouth. How would you answer them? If there really were a God of love, the innocent wouldn't suffer. There's a lot of people right now that are going through some pretty hard times. How do you answer them? There is no God. Can you prove otherwise? Who made God? God, if he existed, would be impersonal. I hate God. If God made us, our moral failings are God's fault. What's in it for me? Science has crippled Christianity. Pleasant near-death experiences of non-Christians disprove Christianity. A God of love wouldn't send me to hell. Now, I hear this one all the time. I hear people's excuses. I am a good person. I don't deserve to go to hell. I don't need God. Christianity is a crutch. The church is full of hypocrites. Not going to deny that one. Christian superstars are only after the money. Joel Olstein, someday, dude, I'm slapping you. I'm just saying. I'm answerable to no one. Christians support environmental vandalism. They're all global warming deniers. Christians are bigoted, racist, sexist, and homophobic. Religion has sparked wars and exploitation. Which religion? Christians have low and negative view of humanity. Man being fallen and all have sinned. How do you know? Who are you to judge? It doesn't matter what you believe so long as you're sincere. There are so many religions. How do you know which one is right? Even Hare Krishnas are more Christian than Christians. The Bible contradicts itself. Christianity is on decline. Christianity is out of date. To become a genuine Christian is almost impossible. I'm not convinced. I'll think about it. All of these are challenges that we'd have to deal with. And all of these are challenges that maybe we've heard from loved ones, let alone some crazy student off of a college campus. So try to answer them. How would you put forward a reasonable, thoughtful answer to any of these? The next time we meet, we're going to go through for quite a number of proofs for the existence of Jesus, the historical Jesus, and then we're going to do a final wrap up. So thank you so much for being a part of this process. Thank you so much for being a part of this class. I have enjoyed being with all of you, even in the virtual version. So with that, God bless and have a happy Easter.